I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad.
So the days are getting colder, the nights are getting longer, but the NFL action just keeps getting better. Week 12 was probably the weekend of the season, and we are here back at Across the Gridiron to break it all down. And I am joined, as always, by my friend and yours, Eddie Equo. But Eddie, normally I will say, Eddie, how are you doing? How was your weekend? I just don't think I'm going to bother asking you that, because anyone who's watched the show before knows exactly how you are feeling today. But try and sum it up in a couple of words.
How about those Cowboys? How about those Cowboys? It was a glorious weekend. It was absolutely glorious. The cold couldn't dampen our style over here. It was an amazing weekend. Matt, it doesn't come any better, when you have your arch rivals coming to your house, right? And then they start going to the fridge and taking food like it's theirs, right? And you're like, nope, no, that's not what you do, right? You need to wait. You need to ask for permission. These Eagles came to the Dallas Cowboys stadium and thought they would just come, stretch out, put their feet on the table, go grab some food, get a beer, pick up the remote and watch our TV. And we're like, no, not today. Not today, sir. This is our house. This is not how we do things around here. So, Cowboys, amazing. 21 down. Unbelievable.
Yes. Yeah. Well, look, we're gonna go through all that. I mean, for you personally, it was a bit of a boom or bust weekend, wasn't it? You got the Cowboys and the Eagles. Then you've got your beloved Arsenal against their North London rivals, Tottenham. It could either be all or nothing for you, and it was certainly all. The Cowboys winning, Arsenal dominating, and probably guaranteeing the league. And for myself, Dolphins weren't playing, so that's a victory in itself. And then in our local derby, Sheffield Wednesday play Sheffield United, and I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Right. So yeah, look, we said before we started, what games we're going to cover, and normally I would start saying, okay, I would joke around that I'd put, I don't know, the Jets or something like that at the top of the running order, but I don't even think I could stop you if I wanted to. No matter what game we talked about first, you would try and angle the Cowboys into the discussion straight away. So let's just start in Cowboys corner and let's see if we can keep this show below 2 hours. It was an absolutely amazing game, an amazing comeback for the Dallas Cowboys. Just a bit of tail of the tape here, right? As you said, they trailed 21-0 to the Philadelphia Eagles, last year's Super Bowl champions, divisional rivals. I think they were going into this weekend as the top seed in the NFC. Yeah. It looked, if you're a Eagles fan, you're laughing because the offense finally looked like they were on form. The Cowboys offense was doing nothing. They were nowhere. And, second half, it was a complete turnaround. Cowboys, you came absolutely storming back, 24 unanswered points to win 24-21 with that walk-off field goal right at the end. Dak Prescott was immense. And the Eagles were just poor. I mean, but let's start with the fan perspective on it. Let's talk about this from a Cowboys perspective. Because again, we could talk about how this affects the Eagles. We could talk about how this affects the playoffs, but you do not give a toss right now, do you? So let's just talk about this from a Cowboys perspective. So Eddie, off you go.
Listen, this game was billed as a David versus Goliath game, right? The Cowboys shouldn't have a chance to play against the Super Bowl champions. Jalen Hurts, MVP, all of that. The Eagles, are amazing. They find ways to win. All they do is win, and all of that stuff. And I was saying to you, last week that there's just something about the Cowboys now that just smells a little bit different. I'm not saying that they're going to go to the playoffs. I'm not saying that they're going to win the league or win their division, because that's far gone. Not even saying that they're going to go far in the postseason. But there's been a lot of things that has happened, as a Cowboy fans, in the last couple of weeks that, has brought us to the depths of despair, right? Starting the season, trading one of your best players, Micah Parsons, to the Green Bay Packers, a team that has traditionally tormented Cowboys, during Aaron Rodgers and even more recently with Jordan Love. Right? So you trade away your best players, and then your defense piss poor, right? Couldn't stop anything, right? They were just absolutely gashing, opening up, everybody coming. It was free for all at the Dallas Cowboys. In fact, if your quarterback was having a difficult time, just look at the schedule. And if you had the Cowboys you were playing as, you were laughing, right? Because your quarterback is going to look like John Elway, going to look like Tom Brady. Everyone's going to look good, because that's what the Cowboys did. The Cowboys were elevating quarterbacks, like no business. So, the Eagles came, very, very confident, and I dare say a little bit arrogant, right? Because actually, if you dissect that game, the Cowboys were 21 goals, 21 points down. But actually, when you really, really look into that game, the first drive of the game, the Cowboys went for it, right? And didn't get it. So gave the Eagles a short field. I mean, if you give decent teams a short field, they're going to score. So the first 7 went in. The second drive, we actually stopped the Eagles. They had a punt, and then we were penalized for 15 yards, right, from that punt. And actually, replays showed that was a wrong call. So the Eagles had a break. They went on down. That drive continued. They scored 14. The third drive, the Dallas Cowboys were marching down the field, and then there was a fumble by a Dallas player. Very unlucky circumstances. He actually hit his own player. Ball pops out. Eagles jump on it. They go ahead and go, and they score. And that became 21-zip. So actually, this was the Cowboys literally handed the Eagles 21 points. The Eagles didn't really have to sweat for it. AJ Brown made an appearance. He had a few catches in the first half. And you're thinking to yourself, ooh, they want to get AJ Brown going, right? Because, this might be it. This might be the day the Eagles unlock their passing, game and just blow the Cowboys away. Because normally, when the Cowboys are down like this, it ends in like 40 points. If you think about, games with the Packers, we've had games like this where it just goes out of proportion. But the Cowboys go and they score in one of their last drives, because Dak Prescott actually threw an interception. And then they take that drive and they score 7 points. And I'm thinking, well, you got the whole second half here. What kind of Cowboy is going to show up here, right? And I hope that this game actually puts to bed, all these aspersions or around Dak Prescott as a quarterback, because I how I feel about Dak Prescott. I think that he doesn't get enough credit, as much as they give credit to a lot of quarterbacks that have done nothing, right? They talk about other quarterbacks, how better they are. There was a time people were talking about CJ Stroud, how, everybody would take him before Dak Prescott. Every time a new quarterback comes back, they try and get Dak Prescott in the equation and say, oh, no, we'll not take that. Dak Prescott is not a better quarterback than those quarterbacks. But this guy, time after time continues to play at an elite level. On Sunday night, he actually passed the Cowboys record for the most passing yards of a quarterback. We're talking about Troy Aikman. You're talking about, all the quarterbacks that have played for the Cowboys. Dak Prescott actually passed all of them. Now, I understand that everyone is measured on trophies. You got to win the Super Bowl, right? That's the ultimate, sort of standard, right? But the NFL is a team game. It's an ultimate team game. And here, everybody gives credit to the quarterback when they win. And then when they lose, the quarterback gets all the blame. But people don't forget that sometimes bad coaching could actually be the reason why players don't do well. We see it all the time. You see Sam Darnold, go to Vikings and take off. You see him do the same thing, with Seahawks. So maybe that's telling you that maybe he wasn't such a bad player, just in bad situation. So going back to that game, second half, Cowboys took off. George Pickens was like, I am the best player on this field right now. Best wide receiver. He had 9 targets and he had 9 catches. That's 100%, success rate. And I'm probably, if I look into the stat, I don't know, of any other player recently that has done that, to actually, get 9 targets and get 100% cash success. It was incredible. Josh Pickens showed up in that game, and Saquon Barkley, I always say it, he's gonna regret not going for that, that title, because he will never get close to it. I said it last season. I know that the Super Bowl is a big thing, but the Eagles really did him dirty, not allowing him to get that record that was so close, within his grasp. But I digress. We kept Saquon Barkley to meaningless yards.
Yeah, 22 total yards off 10 attempts.
That is like 2 point something a carry. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, 2.2. That's a really quick maths, Eddie. Well done.
So listen, the Cowboys defense, you got to talk about the Cowboys defense, right? Because this was a defense that was as porous as a sieve. You could be using the Cowboys defense to bake, and just, that thing that they use for, like, shaking things and putting on the flour in, and that's how the Cowboys defense was. Everything was going through, right? Couldn't strain anything. You can't put it in the sink and hope that it was going to stop stuff from falling through the sink. Everything was falling through. This Cowboys defense looked decent. Not saying they look elite, they look decent, which is a much better place than being abysmal that they were in the first 8 games. They made stops. Jalen Hurts was trying to be funny. They were like, no, not today, right? The Cowboys defense, special teams were like, hey, don't leave me out of the party. I want to take part in this as well. Eagles muffed upon this player, Elijah Clark. I'm sure people are showing that play, right? He got pushed around, when he was chasing for that return, right? He got up from the floor twice and made the play that took the ball off the Eagles. Cowboys jump on it. Okay, they didn't do anything with that. So you're thinking, okay, this is not going to work, right? But then 3rd and 2, normally the Eagles are automatic in 3rd and short situation, right? The Cowboys defense stood up. Osa Odigizua, sack, and that was it. Cowboys took the ball to where Brandon Aubrey does his magic, right? Field goal, walk off, game over. It was a game that really displayed that this team, if they can put it together, have a decent defense, there will be a problem for everybody.
Do you feel better now? I've got to say, last week we kept our recording to half an hour. We're already 14 minutes in. We haven't, and I've even spoke about the game yet. But yeah, look, clearly a very happy Cowboys fan now. Let's move on. No, Well, no, look, I think you picked up on a couple of bits. I think, I rag on Dak Prescott pretty much purely just to annoy you, to be honest, because I know how much you fantasize about him. But to give him his flowers, just in general, yeah. Yesterday he did become the leading pass yardage quarterback in Cowboys franchise history. That is nothing to be sniffed at, right? He's overtaken Tony Romo. You mentioned Troy Aikman. Cowboys have had some great quarterbacks, and he is leading all of them now. So fair play to Dak Prescott. He had an immense game. He needs to be fair. He's been immense all season. And if Cowboys do sneak into the playoffs, then he is absolutely in with a shout at the MVP, without question. And if you look at it from a Cowboys perspective, a win like that against your most bitter and fierce rival, it can cause ripples in the division. I don't think you're going to catch the Eagles now, but we'll come on to the Eagles in a second. But this is sort of momentum that you can build, and you could be making a push. You could make a push to the playoffs still. That is not outside the realms of possibility, right? Games like this against divisional rivals have a massive comeback victory that can build all sorts of potential. All sorts of momentum that could carry you to the playoffs. And you mentioned defense. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't great in the first half, but second half, it's much better. You stopped them, you stood up tall, as you said. And I asked you when the trade was made, and you brought Quinnell Williams. Yeah, I brought, and I said, do you think this is a type of trade that could give you a shout of the playoffs? And do you remember what you said, Eddie?
I did. I said there's no chance.
There was absolutely no chance. He's been great. He's a sort of defender that you've needed. And yeah, look, this is a fantastic victory for Cowboys. It was a great game, and anytime you come back from 21 points, when you're 21 zip down, you're like, oh god. But fantastic result, and again, it gives you some momentum. But I know your narrative is on the Cowboys, but I do want to talk about the Eagles a little bit as well, because these are the Super Bowl champions. These are, or were, the number one seed in the NFC coming into this weekend. We talked about them struggling in offense going into this. There was, that's been no secret this season. The offense hasn't quite clicked. You mentioned AJ Brown get some yards, and so he was probably the most dangerous player. But this was not a good look for not a good look for an Eagles team. This hurt. Jalen Hurts will look good in the first half. Second half was pretty much anonymous. And I think I remember listening to a podcast that basically listed out their last sort of like eight sort of drives. It was punt, turnover, punt. It just did not happen for them. And this is a team who are going to get into the playoffs, right? Because the chance of you catching to take that top is unlikely. Washington aren't going to do it. And Cowboys are now the first team who were officially eliminated from the playoffs, right? So they're the first team who are done, the Giants. So the only team who can catch them is yourselves. But if they are going to get to playoffs, they are going to have to show some backbone here, aren't they? They're going to have to start making plays on the offense, and they've got to stop blowing leads, right? You can't continuously rely on your defense every single time if you're not going to put points on the board. I mean, this was, again, take your Cowboys hat off for a second. Look at it, from a neutral perspective. This was a hard watch for Eagles, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. The Eagles have problems, and they've had problems since the season, right? We always talk about them, after their game, and we say it just looked ugly, right? It just didn't look pretty. It looked clunky. It just looked like, team that is like, like when you get into a room and you're trying to find the light switch, and you think that it's just there, and then you're like trying everywhere, and it's like, where is the light switch? Has it moved? Right, and you're hitting stuff in the room. This is how the Eagles look sometimes when they are playing. Like, they have quarters where you're just like, what are they doing? I think there is a start. If you look at the Eagles games this season, they don't show up for one half. There's like like one half of the game, they pretty much don't do anything. I remember there was a game that they were a minus yardage in like the first half or so, and then they kicked on in the second half and won the game. The Eagles have problems. And I think sometimes when you win a Super Bowl and you win a championship, sometimes it gives you a kind of arrogance that, okay, we didn't look great. We got there to the end and we won the trophy. So you almost don't pay attention to the little things as much as you should, right? And all through the season, people have been talking about the Eagles passing attack. AJ Brown, not getting in as much productivity as he normally would. Jalen Hurts not doing what he's supposed to be doing, but they were winning, right? The defense was carrying them, in a lot of games, and they were making the one play or two plays that was enough for them to win. Now you're getting to that stretch. You're getting to the stretch where now teams are telling you who they are. The bad teams are the bad teams. And the good teams that have had some difficult patches are now putting a run together. Whether it's the Ravens, whether it's the Bears, who the Eagles are coincidentally playing next, whether it's the Rams. You look at the NFC now, there are a few teams that are beginning to stick their head and say, hey, I think we're going to be reckoned with. So the Eagles have to be careful that this doesn't become what happened 2 years ago, 10-1, and didn't win anything, to the back end of the season, and ultimately limped into the playoffs and then got kicked out by the Bucs. So they've got to start to change things around, or else it could end up in despair.
No, absolutely. And I mentioned obviously how great a momentum builder this could be for the Cowboys when you come back to win. The exact opposite is true for the Eagles. Having a defeat like this against your divisional rivals, your hated divisional rivals, and to be 21-0 up with you being the best team, probably better roster of players, and lose, this could be completely demoralizing for their season. So yeah, they do have to be careful. The NFC is looking pretty stout. I mean, for me, they're not the most complete team. The most complete team and the best looking team in the NFC right now are the Rams.
Yeah,
they've got their work cut out. I said they will probably, 99% certain they will get to the playoffs, but they're going to have to improve if they want to go back to that Super Bowl. But look, I think that's a good 20 minutes talking about one game. And to be honest, Eddie, I'm pleased we've actually been able to keep you to 20 minutes on that. But let's move on to the next game. The next game we want to talk about is actually who you guys are playing next week. And let's talk about them Chiefs, should we?
Yeah.
And obviously the
breaking glasses,
yeah, getting the boring glasses on. You could take the gangster glasses off now. Then is that it?
I couldn't see well all the time.
But you look bloody good though, Eddie, didn't you? Let's be honest,
which is all that counts.
Absolute sexy bastard. That's what's going to get the views in as you wear those glasses. But yeah, look, let's talk about the Chiefs, because this is again another great victory for them. They beat the Colts again, who were up there, first or second seed in the AFC. Another come from behind victory to win in overtime, 23-20. And this was again just another. We say don't bet against the Chiefs, don't bet against Mahomes. The Colts couldn't put this to bed, and Mahomes then just came to play, and he was exceptional second half, wasn't he?
He was. This game, too many times we come back and we talk about, a game where a team had blown a lead. We're just talking about, the Cowboys-Eagles game. The Colts were 11 points up, in this game, and somehow found a way to blow that. We're talking about the most potent offense in the league so far. There were basically, scoring points for fun. Jonathan Taylor, who would be in the conversation, for MVP too as well. He was getting busy, across other teams. But when you play good teams that are desperate, right? And I don't think that the Chiefs' problems were automatically solved. I mean, the Colts were in this game despite so many false, steps, mistakes that they made. This game was still close. This game had to go into overtime, for the Chiefs to actually win. So it tells you a number of things. First of all, it tells you that the Chiefs are not quite there yet. They're not at the place where they can blow teams, away. Um, Remember last year they were winning those odd games where by one score game, just finding a block field goal, something crazy happening. Could this be that they are returning to that form? I don't know. I think this was more a reflection on the Colts. And I don't know whether it was more psychological that we're playing the Chiefs. And then you stand on the other side and you see Patrick Mahomes. And Tom Brady used to have this effect on teams.
He did.
He would show up in games and the other quarterback or the other team would be like, oh my goodness, Tom Brady, on the other side. And they're not themselves. They're clutching a little bit. They're doing things, untypical, uncharacteristic. The Colts were clearly the better team going into this game, so they should have won. But they let the Chiefs hang around, and you know what they say about playing with your food. At some point, your food is going to bite you.
What the hell do you eat? You've got to cook the chicken before you eat it. Yeah.
I think so.
Bizarre comment.
That's a story for another day.
Well, that's a kind of searing analysis you get here at Across the Gridiron. And I don't think the NFL are going to be hiring us anytime soon, are they?
No. But the Chiefs, what they've done is that they've kept themselves alive for one more game. That's basically what they've done, right? Because they lost that game and it would have been, good night, Irene, right? So now the Chiefs are living game by game now, right? The next 3 games that they play, none of that is going to guarantee them into the playoffs. So they just have to keep stacking wins and hoping that something happens. Because right now in the playoff seedings, the Chiefs and the Cowboys are right in the same place. They're 10th, right? So you're gonna need, because it's 7 teams that get into the playoffs. So you need 3 teams in front of you to absolutely mess up for you to get in. So yeah, it's looking very desperate, and clearly they play like a desperate team over the weekend. But you've got to say, fair play to the Chiefs. It was at Arrowhead where they traditionally play well, or at least get their wins from. So played well, crowd helped them get over the line, but you still have questions to ask about this Chiefs team.
Well, yeah, look, you still got questions. I see what you're saying, that they're both sort of 10th, sort of in the playoffs compared to like similar to Cowboys. I think it's very different though, because if you look at the playoff hunt, we'll come on to the games in a second, but I just wanted to pull you up on this bit a little bit. So you have outside of the 7 who are currently in space of the playoffs, you've got 3 teams who are 6-5. You've got the Steelers who are 6-5, the Texans 6-5, and then you've got the Kansas City Chiefs who are 6-5. Yeah. Who are below the Chiefs? It's the bloody Miami Dolphins who are 4-7, right? So basically, anyone below that is out, because Miami aren't in the shout, right? Yeah. So you basically got 7 from 10, and at the moment the Chiefs are bottom of that list, but they're still only 1 game behind the team who are currently 7th, which is the Buffalo Bills. Yeah. So they are by no means out of this. And we've seen what's happened with the Ravens, who have now won 5 of the bounce. They're top of their division. And it's the Steelers who are looking. I generally don't think the AFC seems doesn't feel that strong to me, certainly in the wild card races. I mean, you've got I mean, your top four, you've got the Patriots who have done great. The Colts, I'm still, even though they're second, I'm still unsure about the Colts. The Ravens, who are now on a fantastic, who are on a fantastic streak now that they've got Lamar in. And you've got the Chargers who blow very much hot and cold, the Jaguars who blow hot and cold, and Bills who have lost 3 of their last 4 road games. Right.
Yeah.
So I still think the AFC is wide open for the likes of the Chiefs or the Steelers, maybe less so the Texans. But I certainly think one of those teams could make it. So I don't think they're quite in that living game by game basis just yet, because I just think the AFC, certainly for the wildcard spaces, is just so open at the moment. And if you've got a winning record going into Thanksgiving, which they have done, I think that the game is certainly open. But that's on the playoff bit. I'm sure we'll talk playoffs in more detail another week. But back to this game in particular, what I found fascinating, just looking at the stats, just like we sometimes do, the Chiefs nearly got double the amount of total yards that the Colts did, right? 494 versus 255. That's a huge difference. The third down efficiency was great. Fourth down efficiency was great. They had, again, nearly double the amount of plays that the Colts. It was, the Kansas Chiefs had 91 total plays compared to 50 of the Colts. So you take all that, you would think that should be a dominating victory for the Chiefs. They just could not get it done in the red zone. 1 of 6 in the red zone. It was field goals, field goals, field goals. They were just doing enough to keep themselves in the game. The Colts couldn't quite put them to bed. But when you go into a fourth quarter 11 points down, you mentioned Tom Brady. It's a really good comparison, because people always said, if you've got Tom Brady on the field if he's 2 scores down going into the fourth quarter, there's still a chance. And Mahomes still carries that weight of expectation. He was able to take him down. The Colts froze, I think, which this is why I said I think they'll obviously get into the playoffs now, but I don't fancy him to go very far. In that, I'm still not potentially sure of it. I still think the Chiefs could go further than the Colts, but I can't say that too hard, because I did say the Chiefs would be 1 and done in the playoffs, right? So I did, and I'm still sticking with that. They've got to get to the playoffs first, but I still think they'll be 1 and done. But yeah, I think this was a must-win game for the Eagles, for the Chiefs, which is what I said when we did our preview, and they came out, and I think that they were able to minimize the impact of Jonathan Taylor. He just had 58 yards, 16 carries, which for him this season has been poor. But I think this is a good victory for the Chiefs. I think they go on. Could they use this to build momentum? They have to, essentially, don't they?
Yeah, what a fascinating game awaits us on Thursday.
Absolutely. We've gone from one of the most boring games to one of the most must-watch games I think we're going to see over the Thanksgiving weekend.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's go back across to the NFC. Let's look at one of these other games that we want to focus on now. I mentioned them in the past. We as probably the best team in the NFC right now, the LA Rams, who beat a pretty depleted-looking Tampa Bay Buccaneers side. Eddie, I'll let you go through this in a bit more detail. What do you reckon to this one?
This was a game where, when it's like, you go on your sports day, right? And
where are you going with this? Oh, I've gone all blurry.
So sports day, and it's a track day as well, and everyone has been given the big guns, all the way leading up to the day, about who's faster, and all of that. And then you've got this kid, right, that has been running for quite a while, and then he's clearly very fast. And then this kid from nowhere who's just like, everyone is like, oh, have you seen this guy? Oh, he's pretty good and all of that. Oh, I'm sure he can take you and all of that. And then the kid who's been a season runner is just kind of thinking, well, I don't know what all the noise is all about. Then you get on the track, and then the superior athlete basically just takes over. This game was basically the Rams just showing that they're a more superior team in every facet of the game against the Bucs. And the Bucs are an up-and-coming team, right? Baker Mayfield has been doing absolute miracles with that team. He's been wielding them to fourth quarter comebacks, wielding them to wins. But at some point, once you don't have your Avengers, no Mike Evans, no Chris Godwin, no Bucky Evan, you start to lose, the players that complement, what you do well. You can't go to the Rams, you can't go to a gunfire with a bow and arrow, right? This is just a mismatch. And I like what the Rams are doing right now. They are leaving no doubt after a game that they are clearly the better team. They are pulverizing teams when they play them. So it's like, when the Rams play you, they want to leave no question that they are the better team. When they played the Jacksonville Jaguars, remember that game? It was like 35-7 or something. Mm-hmm. The Rams put it on them. Then they went to the Saints, not a very good team. They put it on them, 34 points to 10. San Francisco, it was 20 points at least, I think, in that game. It was 40-something, right? The Seahawks, they played it a little bit closer because maybe that tells you more about the Seahawks, in terms of that they might be a serious team. And then they played the Bucs and they laid 30 on them as well. So I think you're seeing, the MVP of the league right now in Matthew Stafford. He's clearly playing very well. He's not making interceptions.
Just on that. He has thrown, Matthew Stafford's thrown 27 touchdowns since his last interception.
That's just crazy.
It's absolutely mad. He hasn't had an interception since week 4 or something, and 27.
He's forgotten how to throw interceptions.
I know it's not a bad trend to have, and he's been immense, and he said he is at the moment the MVP in the making, isn't he? And the Rams are just dominant in all phases of the game. 34-7 against a team who a few weeks ago we were talking about dark horses. I think they're the darkest of dark horse now. I think the Buccaneers. Bless them.
And this was another game that was 21 points in the second quarter.
Yep.
The Rams, absolutely was touchdown, 21 points in the back of an eye. But the Bucs didn't have the resources to come back.
No, especially now that Baker Mayfield picked up an injury.
Yeah.
Teddy Bridgewater came in. I mean, the Buccaneers have struggled with injuries quite a bit this season. And, we were crediting them a lot in the early part of the season when they were winning games despite having a lot of injuries. And it's just kind of creeping up. And if obviously Baker Mayfield, who's carried that team a lot certainly for a lot of these fourth quarter comebacks that they've had throughout the season. But this is concerning. They had a strong start at 5-1. But yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think. So it's his third straight defeat and fourth losses in the last 5 games.
Yeah, it's not good.
They're on a slide that they need to run. But for the Rams, on the opposite, 6 straight wins, 9-2, best record in the NFC going into Thanksgiving. They look the team to beat, don't they, in the NFC?
They do. Nobody will want to go play the Rams, that's for sure. I think, with the way they're playing, injuries aside, we might be looking at the Rams in the Super Bowl. I don't think it's crazy to say that even right now.
No, I don't think that. I don't disagree with you. I think they are the informed team. They are. If we were picking it now, they'd be my pick. But games aren't played on paper, as especially when it comes to playoff football. But I mean, look, I think they've been immense and very much deserve their position. But let's move on to another game in the NFC. Let's look at the team. We keep talking about them. Sort of like the surprise, one of the surprise packages of the NFC this season. But at some point, they've got to stop being a surprise package, and that's the Chicago Bears, who once again picked up another victory. This time in an overtime 31-28 victory against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They just keep getting it done. They sit top of their division.
Yeah.
This will do wonder for their confidence. They capitalized on turnovers. This was a good game. Where do you sit on this one?
This was a close game for the Bears. I think you saw two teams defensively. I could say they were evenly matched. The Bears defense have been coming along, and it's probably been partly responsible for how well they've been doing. They've been taking the ball away, from other teams. Their front seven has been hunting, relentlessly. But they also met, a team that the defense is also very strong. J.J. Watts and them, basically just they're wrecking things, right? This game was close, pretty much. And I don't think that you could separate either teams, even going into the fourth quarter. Right? It was neck and neck, and you can see by the scoreline. You're going to give Pittsburgh, credit, right, for hanging in there despite not having Aaron Rodgers in this game, because you would have thought it would have been a bit more lopsided towards the Bears. But clearly, the defense of the Steelers came up to play. I mean, Caleb Williams, everyone has been talking about him since he came out from the draft, right? And you remember the stories about he was this generational talent that had never been seen before. He was going to do amazing things in the league and all of that. And I think the jury is still out. We don't know whether this is the Caleb Williams that is trending upwards. Because when I watch the games, I don't leave the games thinking, oh, that was amazing by Caleb Williams. Just feels functional, feels efficient. It feels like they've got a good coach in Ben Johnson, who's making things very simple for him. He's making the throws. The defense are doing their thing. So yes, it was a good win for the Bears, and absolutely, just blowing things up in that whole NFC North right now, because the Bears have become a problem. The Vikings, who we thought potentially was going to be the ones pushing, nowhere to be seen. So you've got three teams in that division. They're all going to play each other, in the next couple of games. So I think it's really going to be interesting how things shake up. But I think for me, the story here was, like you said, we can't be looking at the Bears as a surprise package anymore. I think with the record that they have now, they have to be taken seriously. The next couple of games is going to tell, right? Do they keep on with this streak, playing the Eagles next? Do they continue on that trajectory? I think that's really going to be important for them from a confidence perspective, because I think, if they go and they beat the Eagles, I think that could be watch out. This Bears, could be for real, I think. But for me, I think the story here is Bears are for real. Got to take them seriously. They're leading their division, and they don't look like they've got signs of having a dip or going on a backward slide.
No, I mean, I think they've won 4 on the bounce. They're now 8-3. You're absolutely right. They are top of the NFC North. They deserve to be there. I think Johnson and Williams seems to be a matchup or a pairing that's working. which is great, which I think is great to see, and it's great to see Williams, who has shown promise, I think, in his first 2 seasons, but in order to get him to next level, to get that confidence to go in and win games, 3 touchdowns, decent QB rating in the last game. Yeah, I mean, I think I think generally we were talking about the AFC being open. I think the NFC this season is absolutely fascinating, right? Because we've talked about the NFC East. We've talked about Eagles now being 3 games ahead of the Cowboys, and the Commanders and the Giants not being involved. But the NFC North, you've got the Bears at 8-3, the Packers 7-3-1, and the Lions 7-4. Any of those teams can still win that division. In the NFC, in the South, you've got the Buccaneers at 6-5 and the Panthers at 6-6. Either of those 2 teams could win. And to be honest, whoever doesn't win that division is probably not going to make it in the wild card, because you've also got in the NFC West, you've got the Rams 9-2, the Seahawks 8-3, and the 49ers 8-4. There are so many teams who have got good, strong, winning records coming into Thanksgiving. I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating how this, how the NFC shapes out when it comes to the playoffs. But so yeah, look, credit to the Bears. Let's just quickly go. Let's just go around the ground, see if there's anything else that we kind of picked up on. The one I think it's worth mentioning. We talked about this team a lot pre-season, but we've not talked about them at all during the season, really, because they've been well, other than the game in London. Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns, and let's talk about Mr. Shedeur Sanders, or whatever, because he got his first start for the Browns, and it was a winning game. He 24-10 against probably one of, if not the worst team in the league, in the Oakland Raiders, the Vegas Raiders. Sorry, I'm going really old school calling the Oakland Raiders, but the Las Vegas Raiders. He came in obviously and played a bit last week, and he was panned, shall we say, for his performance last week. But he's come in this week and he's played and he's won, and he's come out and said that, oh, just look at what I can do if I'm given more reps in training and all this kind of stuff. So he's certainly not lacking for confidence, isn't he? But yeah, did you see much of this game?
Listen, I saw a bit of this game, and the first quarter of the game was probably the most adrenaline-filled quarter, of a quarterback, because this is like everyone has been waiting for this, right? The Cleveland Browns fans have been waiting for this. They've been calling for Shedeur, for so long, right? And he finally makes that debut, and then he goes and gets 14 points in the first quarter, and that has got to be a good thing for anyone. He must have made him feel good, made the fans feel good, and he made some interesting throws, as well. But then, at the same time, he had 2 quarters where they were not going anywhere. They didn't score in 2 quarters. And then, of course, they picked it up in the 4th quarter. And then he threw some interceptions, that was like, oh, goodness me, what is that? But it was the perfect game. If there was a game that you would have wanted your quarterback to come and make his first start, it was going to be against the Raiders. It was going to be against a team that have looked bad, not just in terms of their record, but in terms of when you watch them play. Because sometimes, some teams, like you look at the record and you're like, it's just been a little bit unlucky, because when you watch the game, the bounce goes just in the other direction. They miss the field goal, or, someone, misses a punt, or blocks a field goal and something like that, and they lose, right? Unfortunate losing games. But no, the Raiders have not been unfortunate. They've been losing games. So this was a perfect game to ease Shedeur in. Having said that, the next game is going to really be the test. The next game, they play the 49ers. And in this game, they're going to really have to show whether that first game was a spark, that might give the Cleveland Browns food for thought and think maybe this is our quarterback, or it could just be like, okay, we're back to square one, right? We're still looking for our quarterback. I hope he does well. I think for his sake, I think it would be good for him to either play well for the rest of the season. I know the Browns are not going anywhere, and they've got a great defense. Myles Garrett, 3 sacks again in this game, just absolutely dominant. He's the defensive player of the year. There's no question about that. There's no one even debating that. But I think for Shedeur, it's about reps. It's about getting more on the field, playing a little bit more, building confidence, building experience. You shouldn't judge a rookie quarterback that starts the season halfway through, but he's going to get judged. He's going to get judged because of, the links with his father, who his father is, and how he talks, not for everyone, because people might think, is that arrogance? Is that confidence? And there is a very thin line between the two. So I think this game, it was all about him getting his start and then getting that win, which was great for him. Now it's about, okay, let's forget that now. You're in the NFL now. You've got your start. You've got your chance. Can you go out there and prove it game after game?
Yeah, fair play to him. I said he just needs a bit of confidence, the young man, doesn't he? Yeah. You mentioned Myles Garrett. Let's just touch on that a little bit. 18 sacks so far this season. Yeah. He is going to smash the record, isn't he? He's going to smash the 22 and a half sacks is the season record held by Strahan and TJ Watt. He's got like 6 weeks to get 4.5 sacks. He's going to absolutely obliterate that. He is an absolute machine. You've talked about this before, and fair play. What is he doing at Cleveland?
It's gotta be that. It's gotta. But 40 million,
I suppose he's got 40 million reasons to say, I guess. But the thing is, it does. We're not going to bang on about this now. We've been doing this for nearly an hour today, but it's going to get to the point where you've got to, the money is nice in the bank, but you want to look at the trophies or the rings in the cupboard, and he can go to any team and make them Super Bowl contenders, unless their name is Cleveland Browns. He is the biggest fish in a pretty unsuccessful pond. But I get his record, and then I think for Cleveland, I think they should be. You'd almost think they should be looking to trade him to try and rebuild if the amount of draft picks they can get for him. But anyway.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of it for this week. I mean, there's not really a huge amount of games to look forward to. Other games to look at really had huge implications. The Bills lost again, which was a bit of a shock on Thursday night. Yeah. But this was an absolutely incredible game, incredible weekend of NFL action, as always. We always seem to say that. But it's. The playoffs are really sort of taking hold now. We're coming into the busy Thanksgiving weekend, and we now know what teams are, don't we?
Yeah.
Once you go to bank, you are what you are going into the season. But it's still all to play for. Eddie, as always, been an absolute pleasure breaking it down with you. I have tried to live off vicariously through your joy for this weekend, but I just haven't been able to do it. So as a Sheffield Wednesday fan and a Miami Dolphins fan, it's hard to find joy in anything at the moment. So I'm glad to see you're happy, because if anything's going to make you happy, it's not your performance in the predictions anyway. It's definitely not.
I wins when I can.
Absolutely. So like that, all is less to say for me. Thank you guys for tuning in and watching us again across the gridiron. Please like, share, subscribe. But as always, Eddie, you happy man, take us home.
Yes. First and foremost, thank you, Cowboys, for a great Sunday. Really, really appreciate that. Thinking about me all the way in the United Kingdom, and having consideration for the late night, staying up to watch that Cowboys game and not allowing me to go to bed. empty-handed. Listen, Cowboys probably might not get to the playoffs, but hey, we've played our Super Bowl. Beating those Eagles the way that we did couldn't be exchanged for anything else. However, it is week 12. We're going into week 13 in the NFL. Playoff football is real, and we're going to be breaking all of that down as well. So stick with us across the gridiron. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And of course, drop in some comments as well. We always love to hear from you guys as well, and tell us what you think about the Cowboys, or maybe about the Chiefs, or could it be about the Rams? In any case, we'll see you in the next one across the gridiron.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the